development, product development. But increasingly, you're going to see, increasingly over the next 10, 15 years, you'll see high-tech research scale out. It's already there, it's going to scale out, scale up. That's my view.
Thank you. Lakshmi, your take on the same problem statement?
Yeah, absolutely. I think very similar to what he said, right? The master's and the PhD program really trains one to define a problem, right? It's not about how things are now. It is about what will happen 5 years down the lane and thinking of the next thing really, and converting that research paper into a product. Um, and Yeah, I think most often what happens is that we think a master student or a PhD student might not fit into an industry, but I think a 10-year-old thing. Right now, what we need are people like the audience here who can come into the industry and contribute their ideas, their ways of thinking, and new problems that they think that they should solve. I'll give you one example, right? We all know about anomaly detection. That means some thing coming into the network and posing itself as something else. For example, you can have a Raspberry Pi and design it and write code and ask it to make it behave like an IP phone, for example. Now, how would you ever detect that this is really not an IP phone, but somebody else kind of impersonating it? So there are lots of different ways to kind of solve this problem, but we need a completely new set of ideas, new thoughts of what all this particular endpoint is giving out or is talking or is behaving, so that you can pattern that behavior and then find out the anomaly. For example, one thing that could be done is to see how the power consumption is, which will be very different between a Raspberry Pi and an IP phone. This is just an example, right? So every problem I think that we have, that we see, I think the PhD and master students are wired itself differently. They are wired to think differently, wired to formulate problems, which I think will be extremely important in the industry. I think it has been for very long, and now it's much more important. That's
Thank you. Valuable points. With that, I would like to divert attention to Sriram and say, as a faculty member in the institute, we take pride in solving problems. But how much effort does a PhD student do in identifying a problem that is worth solving? Not every problem needs to be solved. So how does that differentiation come in as a training that we can do? And your thoughts on that?
Yes. So, I mean, your excellent question again. So, I mean, the first, a few months in, beginning of a PhD research, and sometimes it goes much beyond a few months, is, of course, as you rightly said, identifying the right problem, identifying a particular topic to focus more deeply into. And this really requires, quite consistent and focused work in understanding what has been done in the prior, and also having some sense of the background courses and material that the students does in the first 1 or 2 years of the PhD program to equip themselves to understand this literature. So it's the whole key direction is, of course, matching the interest and the skill of the student with the requirements of the project, and also in trying to find the landscape of the problem that we are generally interested. Of course, what really helps is an environment. The student is not all by himself or herself. There is a lab. There are set of students who are, let us say, in their advanced PhD stages. There are students who are in their middle path, and there are certain students who are starting. So discussions among students, I have found myself to be a very easy way that students get along with each other. And more importantly, about the broader discussion, right? About PhD or masters in general covered, for industry jobs and so forth. I also foresee, PhD not just for the technical depth. Of course, you go deeper into a particular problem. You try to establish yourselves as a sort of, an expert in that domain or topic. And my advisor also used to say, a PhD gives you the license to talk. So all these things are there. On top of all this, my own feeling, or it's for a reason that it's called a doctor of philosophy, because it teaches you lessons for life. it teaches you that when you are left with, when you are not, being handheld by other people and other, experts to solve a problem, you come up, you think through your way, you may be uncertain. There are certain points in time where you feel lost, and it's quite natural to have that. But you kind of gather over this and overcome this to, get through those periods, come up with partial solutions. And these are really lessons for life, be it in any other walks of life that you are stuck, you are, having trouble, moving ahead, and these, fill you with confidence that you can solve those and move ahead. And the second comment about the whole, India versus the rest, about 20 years ago, if you see, most of the discussion was saying China was the electronics or the, the manufacturing hub. All the innovation happens in the US and maybe Western world in Europe, and then China is really manufacturing the products for us. Now you see 20 years down the line, you see the most of the, innovations are coming from China. Startups, research culture, industries which are, multi-billion dollars, all of them, has come through, with the course of having these early startup in manufacturing or electronics. So it's not a bad thing that even if, India is labeled currently, it's only a matter of time. Our own startups, innovations, we certainly have the best talent, to leapfrog in the research and the innovation space.
Wonderful. But we we have the pride of the nation. In the words I say, Indian Institute of Science gets typically the gate rank toppers as part of the students as masters in the master's degree. Uh, a lot has been spoken about how PhD students take up this path. But what about the masters? I'm following it up with Sriram itself, Dr. Sriram. What about the master students? How they are, I would say, uh, chiseled stone into beautiful art. So, what does that chiseling that the faculty members are doing here?
So the first, we see among the master students, the first 2-3 months is a bit of an awakening. I mean, if there are students here who have been, through the ISC Masters program, they say, no, this is not what we thought about when we did our undergraduate courses. The life is totally different. Everything is mathematical. Everything has, a sort of a theoretical flavor to it. You are not particularly seeing, I am going to solve this problem, or I am going to design a particular technology out of this. We partially move into the abstract world, and for, good reasons for that, right? The students here, are, at least in the IAC, what we find, they come out of, by their own choice. So they didn't come because they could not get another job. They didn't come because their parents pushed them into the courses, because they are much beyond that age. They have taken their own decisions. They are here out of their choice to understand, the abstract world a little bit. And by learning the abstract world, both in the courses, so this the first awakening happens in the 2 months, and then surely also a bit of awakening happens when they do the project. So they start seeing that not everything is well defined in courses. At least you have a timeline. There is no timeline. Research doesn't really end with their own master's thesis. They start somewhere and they end at some point. It's still a continuum. So all these realizations come through, and then the master's project, at least in IAC, is designed in this particular way. You want to analyze whether you fit that. You fit a research culture. So this is a mini version of 6 month or a year of project that we provide for the master students to understand whether you like that freedom and the responsibility that comes with it, or you prefer to be in a, technology driven, or a world where you want to employ the technology directly to the user, like in an industry. So this sort of realization, many students have said they get the flavor and teaser of it. Some like it, pursue their own higher studies. Some don't like it and go for the masters, but at least go for the, industry job. But at least what we can do is give them what the flavor is, and then let them choose further.
Okay. Now, moving these questions to Yogesh, there is students do their master's project. They realize what is a near to real life problem, and when they are ready after the 2 years training, when you see them transitioning to a government research lab, either in ISRO or the various other labs of DRDO, how does the traditional senior leaders of the research lab handle this very new, rampant, high energy activity inputs coming into their labs, and how is that transition felt? Because that is where the early career impact happens to them in the labs, whether how are they treated or how are they handled.
Okay. Uh, yeah, I would say that this is a very good question and quite relevant in my case, because I happened to join my job at ISRO immediately after my MTech at IAC. Uh, and it might be a little difficult to generalize and answer to this question, because there are lots of variables associated with it, depending right from what is the area of work that you have been allotted, and what essentially is the work that is being carried out by the at the center that you have joined. So there are so many different aspects that will influence the outcome of this, but by and large, if you look at it, uh, most of these organizations, they do uh, try to kind of uh, judge the potential of the candidate, whoever is joining, and good amount of thought gets into the capabilities of the let us say the new candidate, and the interests and the potential, because it makes sense from two angles. One thing is getting the work done in a more efficient way, because uh, even from managerial point of view, as long as you are able to assign the right candidate for the job, your job is half done. Identifying the right candidate for the job is a very important task, and definitely a lot of thought goes into this. So that way, one need not be really too concerned about getting into an area where he or she feels stuck and not able to contribute much. Those kind of concerns need not be there, because in most of these organizations, let us say if we are talking of ISRO and DRDO, there's a the kind of work that happens in these places is uh, uh, quite varied in nature. So definitely, for a candidate with potential, there will be a job which is well suited, and to a large extent, the management will ensure that the right candidate is assigned the right job. So yeah, I feel I was personally quite fortunate, but I have seen that most of us who have joined with these kind of backgrounds, we